So we just left from the African American Civil War Museum. It's located on Vermont Avenue Northwest right off the U Street corridor. And it's my first time in there, to be perfectly honest. And that's something actually I mentioned when we were walking in, that this is a museum that I know for a fact very few people have visited. Walking in there, I didn't know what to expect. The timeline was just on point, and just, I think, going step by step, and not only just going beyond the Civil War, and just showing how what was achieved by black soldiers, what was done by black soldiers, and everything that they were responsible for as a part of the Union Army, how that still continued on long after the Civil War ended. But in still showing that there were still many injustices and prejudices that we as black people had to deal with. In order to continue moving forward, you have to move forward and move with the times. But you have to know where you came from, so that you can always be yourself and never feel the need to bend to make other people feel comfortable. Peace, peace. Geronimo Knows, more formally known Geronimo Collins. But I represent a lifestyle media brand called All the Fly Kids.
Give me the name of the place we just went to and some of your initial thoughts.
Okay. So we just left from the African American Civil War Museum. It's located on Vermont Avenue Northwest, right off the U Street corridor. And it's my first time in there, to be perfectly honest. And that's something actually I mentioned when we were walking in, that this is a museum that I know for a fact very few people have visited or visit on a regular basis. And it speaks to just its position. It's in the cut. If you didn't know it was there, you'd miss it. But walking in there, I didn't know what to expect. You think you know a lot about the Civil War. It's something that you learn about practically every year in American history while you're in school. And I actually learned quite a few things about the Civil War as it relates to black soldiers in the Civil War, as well as our place in the United States Congress post Reconstruction during Reconstruction, as well as much of what happened to us, a little bit of what happened to us at the very beginning of the transatlantic slave trade.
Is there anything that you want to dig into a little more deeper that you saw in there and you were like, oh, that's something I want to explore?
Something I definitely want to explore more would be the two parts on the political end. Not the two parts, on the two parts. One part is on the political end. As I said, I saw that there were a number of black congressmen who were in the United States Congress during the Reconstruction period. And I would like to also learn more about what happened, what was going on in Africa exactly leading up to the transatlantic slave trade. And so I know that's an extensive history that's going to take a lot of time and a lot of research, where I not only will have to do some reading, but I'm going to definitely have to make some trips and connect with some people on the continent to really get a better understanding of what that was. But I think what I saw in there, along with just what I've learned about our history on a modern level, and what I know about what I've learned about Caribbean history, because that's a major part of my lineage as well, is going to bring everything full circle once I definitely touch on the actual African side of it. And it would be great if there were just one whole comprehensive museum on global black history, because we can rant and rave and lament on how so many of us don't know our history, and there's no unity within the diaspora among black Americans and black Caribbeans and black Africans. But truth be told, realistically speaking, you know, we're just too apathetic in our desire to learn about everybody's history. It's so broad, and some of us don't really care to. But I think, much like how we now have a whole museum dedicated to African American history and culture that the Smithsonian opened in 2016, I think that just seeing the numbers of people who are attending that to where it's still the most exclusive ticket in town, I think if something like that existed, a global Black History Museum existed, I think that that would definitely add to people having more knowledge of self and there being more unity achieved within the diaspora. I mean, I'm no expert on sourcing artifacts and you know, being an archivist and things like that, a curator of this type of information. But I think just the timeline, it actually reminded me of one of the exhibits I went to at the National Archives on Prohibition, and the timeline was just on point, and just, I think, going step by step, and not only just going beyond the Civil War and just showing how what was achieved by Black soldiers, what was done by Black soldiers, and everything that they were responsible for as a part of the Union Army, how that still continued on even long after the Civil War ended. You know, but in still showing that there were still many injustices and prejudices that we as Black people had to deal with, despite us helping tremendously, being a pivotal part of the Union's success in the Civil War. I think that, and this is a tall order to ask, but I have learned in the past couple of years, I know that's very recent, but I've learned in the past couple of years that if we don't do better to not only know our history but preserve our history, everything can be told in a way that is not reflective of the truth. Whether, regardless of when in history things happen, the erasure of historical events, and just how not knowing what happened is causing us to continue to repeat many and fall victim to some of the things that the Black community is still plagued with today, despite us having all the creature comforts that we had. You know what I mean? Things are much safer, generally speaking. You know, despite us seeing a lot of stuff on TV where we're getting shot down by whoever, whether it's one of us or a police officer or whoever the case may be, but it's still generally much safer to be a Black person in America today than it was 100 years ago. You know, so I think in knowing that we've made that much progress, in what way can we do better to own all parts of our history and our culture and our existence today? Want to also say peace to Virginia Ali, who was honored today. Virginia Ali is a co-founder of Ben's Chili Bowl, the legendary Ben's Chili Bowl restaurant on U Street. Was one of the three surviving businesses during the 1968 riots, and she co-founded it with her husband Ben Ali, who has since passed on, God rest the dead. And one thing she said in her speech, in her acceptance speech, is that of the three businesses that survive, her business, Lee's Flower Shop, and Industrial Bank, she believes that even during post the riots, when nobody wanted to come up here to U Street, before there was a train station, before U Street was revitalized, before it became what people know it to be today, they were able to survive all of the redevelopment because all three of those business owners owned their buildings. So ownership is a huge takeaway in that too. So just how we can do better to own all parts of our history and culture and our existence today.
why would you, as a person who's really big on contemporary, expensive experiences, why would you encourage them to visit?
Because so you can know who you are when you go into these places. You know what I mean? Look. Anybody who knows me knows, and I'm looking directly in the camera and I'm saying this. Anybody who knows me knows that wherever I go, I'm always myself. But I'm always respectful because I have respect for myself and my parents raised me right. But in knowing who I am and knowing that regardless of whether or not I could walk into a business, I could walk into a place where I may or may not be the only black person in there, let alone person of color. Regardless of what is on the menu and whether or not I grew up eating these items or whatnot, or if I grew up having access to certain clothing lines or things like that, I respect myself enough and I know myself enough and I know my worth and I know my taste level and I know what I'm still me regardless of where I am. And in order to continue moving forward, you have to move forward and move with the times. But you have to know where you came from so that you can always be yourself and never feel the need to bend to make other people feel comfortable.